Hey, I'm excited to get to talk to you guys today and talk about some of the updates and things that I've been finding out and learning regarding this NAR settlement. Some of the breaking news for you that actually just got this morning is that all along we've been saying that these things are going to go into effect mid-July. Well, then I started to hear end of July. And this morning, I actually got notice that when it's going to go into effect, the earliest. So, actually, let me restate that. The earliest it's going to go into effect now is August 17th. So, everything we're going to talk about today, just as a reminder, it has to be in place. The earliest will be August 17th that we have to do all these things. So, but I just wanted to go through and make sure that everybody understands what is going to be required and some of the more detail, I guess, than what we have had up until now. So, first thing is just that there is now a requirement for us to have written agreements with our buyers. And according to the terms of the agreement, there are two things that are going to trigger this. Now, actually, before I even get into and say any of those things, let me actually even just first make sure that you understand that there's two pieces that govern us. So there's two governing bodies for us as real estate agents. The first one is the Division of Real Estate within the state of Utah that is governing us. So we have some things that come from them that they're like, hey, this is what you have to do according to the law. So we've got that governing body, which is the Division of Real Estate. Then we have our other governing body, which is the Utah Association of Realtors, and then whatever our local board that any of us belongs to. And so as NAR has settled this settlement agreement is between the attorneys who filed these lawsuits and the National Association of Realtors, which then would filter down to the governing body on the stuff we're talking about today is the local boards of realtors. So it's NAR, but they filter it down basically to the board of realtors. So everything we're going to be talking about today really is more along the lines of if you violate one of these new agreements, the board of realtors is the governing body that's responsible to ensure that we are following along the agreements of this settlement. So hopefully that makes sense what I'm saying, which in essence, what I believe, and nobody has come out and said this yet, but my belief is because of that, what is going to happen is they're going to update our code of ethics. So our code of ethics is going to be updated to probably right now what it says is that you have to have a written agreement prior to providing a substantive service. That's currently what it says. My guess is they're going to change it and say prior to showing a property, because that's the two things that are going to trigger us needing to have a written agreement is when we are working with buyers and touring a home. So those are kind of the two terms that you want to think about is if you're working with the buyer and touring a home is what is going to trigger us now having to have a written agreement. Now, so the reason I bring up these two different governing bodies, you've got the Board of Realtors and the Division of Real Estate, is as far as the Board of Realtors is concerned, you just have to have a written agreement. Now, you may or may not have seen that this week Zillow released a written agreement that is 7-day touring agreements. I don't know if that's exactly what the term is, but Zillow came out with this touring agreement that they're going to offer on their website for consumers to use. So that would fit underneath the NAR settlement agreement. But we've got the Division of Real Estate, who is our governing body for us as well here in Utah. Well, they have said, so all along, as a licensed agent in Utah, you already had this requirement by the Division of Real Estate that you enter into a written agreement with a buyer or a seller before performing any acts as an agent for that individual in a real estate transaction. So really, prior to all of this settlement, our Utah code already said we have to enter into a written agreement before performing any acts for that individual in a real estate transaction. And I would define showing a home as performing an act. So we've already had this in place. So the only thing this really is going to change for us is potentially somebody saying you violated our code of ethics, because my assumption is that's what's going to change is our code of ethics. So they're going to be saying you violated the code of ethics if you don't get an agreement signed prior to showing homes for your clients. Okay. So anywhere along the way, if you guys have a question, feel free to stop me and we'll talk about it. So really, this isn't going to affect us too much in Utah because it was already a requirement from the division that we have these written agreements in place prior to performing any acts as an agent for them. So, okay, so now I'm going to switch back over again, and I apologize that I can't keep going from Division of Real Estate over to this settlement and the governing body being the Board of Realtors. But so what does it mean to tour a home? Because they have said we have to have this written agreement before touring a home. And touring a home, as far as they are concerned for this agreement, is that when the buyer and you as an agent go and enter into a house, basically. Now, the other thing that is part of this is it doesn't matter if the buyer is physically with you. If you take them on a virtual tour, a FaceTime or Zoom or something like that, to walk through the property, that would count as well. So you would need to have that written agreement in place to even do a virtual tour of a house. The other thing that I thought was a little funny on this, but they defined a home to mean a residential property consisting of not less than one dwelling unit, which I thought was a little funny, that there has to be at least a dwelling unit, apparently. So I guess if it's land, you don't need one. I don't know. All right. So the next one is, do we have to have a written agreement with buyers? Does that mean that that it has to be an agency agreement? And I already kind of hit this, but no, for the settlement, it does not have to be actually an agency agreement, which is the idea of Zillow then coming out with this touring agreement that they have come up with. But keep in mind, our Utah law still says that we would have to have the agency agreement in place. So really, keep in mind that yes, you really still actually do need that. But again, I guess as far as somebody filing a code of ethics complaint against you, it wouldn't have to actually be a buyer broker for them. But again, our Division of Real Estate says yes, it still has to have that. So the next question that a lot of people have come up with, and I've heard back and forth on, is if you're hosting an open house, do you have to have every person who walks in then sign an agreement to look at the house? And the answer to that is no, you do not. And the reason is because when you're holding an open house, you are there representing the seller. So you're there on behalf of the seller, showing properties to an unrepresented buyer. So you will not need to have any type of an agency agreement to let somebody look at the house when you're holding an open house. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, next question then that people are asking is, are written buyer agreements required when listing agents talk with a buyer on behalf of a seller? And again, the answer to that is no, because so think of it as just anytime you're doing anything representing your seller, you would not need to have this agreement in place. And that would go the same with from the standpoint of the Division of Real Estate, is you are there on behalf of your seller, which is why from the Division of Real Estate standpoint, they're saying that you would need to disclose to a buyer, though at an open house, that you do represent the seller on the home. And you don't have to do that the moment they walk in the door, but you do need to disclose to them that you represent the seller if they were to now start to talk to you about their scenario and why they're looking for a home and why it's important for them to find one, those type of things. Okay. So, but not important to have an agreement with the buyer anytime you are acting on behalf of the seller only. Okay. So, and typically, if you are holding an open house for someone that is, and you're not the listing agent, you are technically in that scenario acting as a sub-agent of the seller, so you still wouldn't need to have that. Okay. All right. Next, are written buyer agreements required when you perform ministerial acts? Is how they had it written. And again, the answer is the things that are going to trigger you needing this is touring a home with a buyer is going to trigger it. But if you're doing some type of ministerial acts on behalf of them, you would not need to. Now, there's not really a definition of what that means, but I would say to just think of it from the standpoint of, if you're taking them to show them a house, you're probably acting as the agent and you need to have this agreement in place. Now, the good news, the thing that I think is good about this is this word is going to filter out to where really you probably should have less resistance from a buyer when you talk to them about, hey, if you want to see this house, you've got to sign this agreement. Now, in terms of that as well, let me just say, we can still do this and write the agreement to be property specific. We can write it and have the buyer broker only last for a week. You can have it last for a day. I mean, you've got all kinds of wiggle room in this in terms of the length of the time of the buyer broker and also the making it property specific. So you're good at being able to deal with and do those things that way. So next one. Are written buyer agreements required in a dual agency scenario, or for us, limited agency, when you're working with both? And the obvious answer to that is yes, you would still need to have that in a limited agency scenario. You're still first going to have to get them to sign that buyer broker. So some of the other things just to make you guys aware of and make sure that you understand is we cannot receive compensation for services from any source that exceeds the amount or the rate agreed to in the buyer broker agreement. So whatever amount you put into that buyer broker agreement, you could not be paid more than that. Now, the good news is you can always go and do, which we've already been doing. So it's kind of awesome that we as a company have already been doing this anyway, of saying, look, if you're going to be getting anything different than what it says on your buyer broker, we need to do an addendum to that buyer broker saying what the commission is going to be. We've already been doing that. So this piece of it, that's really still stays the same. It's just if for some reason it was going to change. So let's say that you had signed it for 3, but for whatever reason, during the negotiations or even before showing the property, or maybe you walk in to show the property and the seller has a sign there that says you will be paid 3.5% buyer agent commission on this home. Well, if your buyer broker says 3%, then you just need to do an addendum to that, changing that and having your buyer sign it and agree to it. So that will work. You could also receive less, although again, from a company standpoint, we're going to require you to do an addendum to your buyer broker anyway. But just know that part of this agreement is you cannot be paid more than what your agreement is, but you can do addendums to change that. Okay. All right. One of the other questions that people have asked is, could you just put a range then? Could you just put a range in there? And we've seen this actually where people have done this on our buyer broker, is put between 2 to 3%. And the truth is, from the standpoint of the the Board of Realtors, again on this, because they're the governing body on dealing with this, is they're not going to dictate how that how we put it in there, what the compensation is that's agreed to. Meaning it could be 0, it could be a flat fee, it could be a percentage, could be an hourly rate. They don't care that way. But as we've talked before, us as a company, we want to make sure that it does match. So, okay, some of the other things that that people have been wondering about as well is, and I know I'm just pounding this to you, but I am going to upload this recording and we'll send out an email to the whole company with this recording as well, so that everybody has it. So if you feel like I'm going too fast, you can review it. So next one though is, what about agreements that are entered into before the policy changes take effect? So what do we do about that? So the answer to that is, if you have something already in place, again, for us at our company, not really a big deal on the buyer broker side, because on the buyer broker side, we're already telling you that it needs to match anyway. But I would say too, and I don't know, Jason, maybe you can say if you've seen this or not, but since all this has been announced, I haven't noticed any buyer brokers that I've seen, and or I guess even Jenny or Marissa or Brianna can speak to it too. But I think hopefully agents are recognize we don't want to put zero on our buyer broker, because there are listings out there on the MLS already that are offering zero. And so if you're putting MLS on there or you're putting zero on there and that's what's being offered, that's what you're going to get. So hopefully agents have kind of caught on to that. So we really shouldn't have to change anything on the buyer side of ours in terms of that. But on the seller side, the things that are going to change or be affected potentially is, our listing agreement currently right now says that the seller authorizes us to offer X amount of dollars or percentage over the MLS. That all has to be removed from our listing agreement. And so I actually yesterday made those changes to our listing agreement. We're not ready to release it yet. It's been sent now to .loop for them to do what they need to do so we can get it added to .loop. But as soon as I get that back from them, which should be within the next week, 2 at the most, I will replace our current listing agreement with this new one, because any reference to offers of compensation on the MLS after August 17th are not allowed. So we can't even have that in our listing agreement. So I'm removing it right now so that any listings we take from once we get this new one uploaded to going forward will be fine. But come August 17th, any current listings that we have that talk about an offer of compensation on the MLS, you will need to do an addendum to that exclusive right to sell, saying that we will not be offering compensation across the MLS. So hopefully we'll get this new one done within the next week or so here, so that really, hopefully, every listing we currently have will be sold by August 17th, right? That's what our hope is. As long as that happens, we don't have to worry. But if for some reason you do have a listing that says that there will be an offer of compensation on the MLS in place when this takes effect, which as of today is August 17th is when they're projecting that it will be, you will need to do an addendum removing that offer of compensation. Now, if the property is already under contract and it closes, that'll be fine. You don't have to do anything, change anything that way. But if it is not, so if it was under contract and then the deal falls through, you would then need to do an addendum to your listing agreement, to removing any agreement to advertise on the MLS. So that's really kind of the gist of the updates and things that I have gotten so far. Anything that I missed, Jason, that we've talked about? Okay.
No, I think
Any
we're good.
questions from you guys that are online watching?
I think I'm good, Russ. This is Hal Brueggemann. I just you clarify things so well. It's great. I appreciate your time.
I have a
Awesome.
question.
Yes.
So we're going to be using this new listing agreement, but we are still going to be allowed to offer an BAC on until August. Are we telling
Correct.
say we get a listing next month, are we telling our clients that we're not going to be offering that across the MLS, or we're not going to
No.
be offering that as of August 17th?
No, so yeah, great question. Thank you for asking, Jeanette. So our listing agreement will still say that we can offer compensation to a buyer's agent. I only removed any reference to the MLS. So nothing will change. We're still good that way. They're still giving us permission to share the commissions. We just don't have it specifically saying on the MLS. So all I took out was 2 places in the listing agreement that said, comma, on the MLS, comma. So
Okay.
really, that's the only thing that came out, is we're just not specifying that it will be on the offer, or
Okay.
excuse me, on the MLS, but they are still giving us permission to offer and compensation, just not the comma on the MLS. Great
Okay.
question.
Thank you.
Yep. Let's see. I'm going to pull this. It looks like there was a couple of comments. Let me see if they were. Let's see.
I think we got them.
I did cover it. Okay. Cool. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, exciting times. We will continue, as Jason and I continue to get more information, and we continue to work on things. We will continue to update you guys. We will be, I am positive we'll end up making more adjustments to our listing agreement and the buyer broker agreement. I'm sure that'll happen between now and, as of today, August 17th, but who knows if it gets pushed again. But I'm sure we will continue to make adjustments, and we'll keep you guys updated on what's going on and how things are affecting us. But as we've said all along, really the main difference for us here in Utah is just not being able to offer that compensation on the MLS. It can be offered anywhere else, just not through the MLS. So anyway, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. If you have other questions, please reach out. We're here to help, and want to help protect you and the company and all of us all along the way. So thanks for being here. Talk to you guys later.